A look back at 2018 and a look ahead to 2019. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Ann Fisher, host of All Sides with Ann Fisher on 89.7 NPR News. Jim Siegel, State House reporter for the Columbus Dispatch. Sam Gresham of Common Cause Ohio, and Mark Weaver, Republican strategist. With things slowing down for the holidays, it is time to look back and look ahead. 2018 was a big political year. We had the first national election since voters put Donald Trump in the White House. Because of term limits, Ohio voters had to choose a new management team, starting with the governor. After more than 4 decades in public life, Mike DeWine captured the state's top job. He beat Richard Cordray in a fairly boring but very expensive campaign.
Our challenges are not solvable just by one party. They're not solvable just by one person. They're solvable by all of us pulling together and working together, and that is my commitment to each and every one of you.
Jim Siegel, but one party remains in control at the State House. What is the attitude of lawmakers about the incoming governor?
Well, of course, they're happy that he's still a Republican, at least the majority Republicans in the legislature. You're kind of seeing that reflected in this lame duck session, the post-election legislative session, where there's still a lot of bills moving, but there's a number of things that I think they may have tried to do related to executive power and elections and such that they are holding off on because they know that Mike DeWine will be willing to work with them. And I think they are happy to frankly, that they're going to get a governor who they can start talking to again. I mean, let's face it, the Republican leadership has not had much conversation with Governor John Kasich in a long time, months, because Kasich has been spending a lot of his time on other things, mainly on CNN and other national news broadcasts, and going to New Hampshire and things of that nature.
That's only part of it, though. This governor has been so disrespectful of this legislature. There's been no love lost between this legislature and this governor for months, and in the last few weeks, it's gotten palpably worse. And so a lot of legislators are really looking forward to Mike DeWine as governor. A, because they like Mike DeWine and think he'll be a good governor, but B, because there is almost zero support for this governor in the Republican caucus of either house.
Does Mike DeWine work better? Does he work at all with Democrats, Ann, do you think?
Oh, I think he has a history going back 30, 40 years in politics in Ohio, so he has some maybe institutional memory of when Democrats and Republicans used to actually talk to each other. So, yeah, I think it's going to be maybe a little bit different on that score, although do they really matter anyways? There's so few of them. I don't think it's going to necessarily do himself any favors by spending too much time with the Democrats, but I think that you're right about that. I mean, but you said going back months. I would say going back years.
Yeah, that's true.
But if he's smart, he'd position himself for the coming future.
He has already by saying he's going to vote for some bills that John Kasich has repeatedly and is expected to again veto.
And his comments thus far, though, I like some of the things. He's talking about expanding early childhood education. He's talking about school to work types of things.
Yeah.
He's talking about dealing with local government problems that the money has been taken away.
Well, we know Mike. I'm a little partial because I was a Mike DeWine consultant. He's a friend, so I'm a little partial. But I'll say this: he is a conservative Republican. He governs more from the center. He's very pragmatic, and he is low-key, solutions-oriented when he's in meetings with Republicans and Democrats alike.
I do wonder, though, because you just mentioned he's pragmatic and he governs from the center. Right. Those are two things the legislature can tend to come up short on. At least they tend to be more to the right. And pragmatism sometimes is lacking. And so I think they're going to start off with a good relationship. I wonder how long it lasts. I'm not saying it won't, because I do think there's a definite potential to have a better relationship. And also, let's not forget that John Husted, who's lieutenant governor, was a former House Speaker. Yeah. He is very aware of how the legislature works, and that could also help him.
So when John Kasich came into office in 2011, the economy was just coming out of the recession, barely out of it, if at all. So the economy, Jobs Ohio was his number 1 priority. It was clear from the get-go. What's Mike DeWine's priority coming in? The economy's doing okay.
Well, he talked about these 4 things I just talked about.
But there's not one that's going to stand out.
I think the one that gets me excited is if he's going to help local government get some money back.
That's going to be a tough sell in the Ohio General Assembly. They've been working for years to pare that down, and it is a big issue with the Ohio Municipal League. They're constantly talking about it now, and who can blame them? They've lost millions.
The issue we'll look back on DeWine with, we look back on Taft, and I worked with Taft, and he was the education governor. He put a lot of money, a lot of time into education. When I talk to Mike DeWine, the issue he likes to talk to me about the most is the opioid abuse. He is personally invested in this issue. I think you'll see him talking about it a lot. And when we look back 10 years from now, we will say there was a governor who made that a priority.
Healthcare related, Medicaid expansion. Does Mike DeWine mess with what John Kasich did there at all, Jim?
Well, I don't know if there's some things, he has talked about wanting to make it work better and make it, so we can afford it better. However,
A work requirement, he's thrown it out there.
Things like that. But I don't know that he's going to try to get rid of it. And frankly, it's almost like that ship has kind of sailed a bit in the legislature. We're now, the one thing about term limits is the folks who fought so hard against something, 6 years ago maybe are not around as much anymore. And so, I think it's just sort of becoming part of our healthcare structure now, but that doesn't mean there aren't changes he won't agree with and won't be trying to do, because as Mark said, he is a conservative. He's going to want to try to find ways to not spend money that he doesn't have to.
75% of Ohioans now support keeping Medicaid expansion. That's a big number.
Well, and Medicaid expansion affects so many people out in the rural areas, and that's where the leadership of the Ohio General Assembly comes from. So I just find it hard to believe that ship hasn't sailed. I agree with Jim.
Social issues, does he sign the heartbeat anti-abortion bill? Does he reverse Governor Kasich's new order giving gender identity discrimination protection?
I don't know about that one.
Well, I think I don't think he supports that. I don't think he supports, from what I understand from the things that he has said, I don't think he's going to support that or or protecting gay rights and that in as far as discrimination goes. I do think at least legislators think he's much more likely to sign the heartbeat bill and other stronger abortion measures than the governor's been willing to sign. So that's why when the governor does do his veto of the heartbeat bill, it's ultimately not going to matter that much, because they can just bring it right back.
Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is likely Mike DeWine's last political stop.
Sure. I think he would tell you that.
Does that affect how he governs?
Well, some people would say he's a lame duck, but he can do 8 years. He's a healthy guy. He works harder than most politicians I've ever met. So I think this is the job he's always wanted. Over the years, he's told me he wanted to be governor. He loved Attorney General. Don't get me wrong. The old prosecutor in him came out, and he threw himself into that job. But those who know him well knew that he wanted to be governor.
But this is
a good place for him.
But this trip is not just about him. They're talking about 16 years, not just 8 years. Him for his 8. And then Husted for his 8. Now, I don't know how they're going to manage that in the handoff of the baton, or how they're going to work together.
I think Mike will support John strongly, but let's get one term at a time here. Right?
There's a long way to go, as we know in this political world these days. John Kasich played 2 roles in 2018. He, of course, was still governor, but he also played the part of the nation's chief Republican critic of President Trump. As Jim mentioned, he made scores of national television appearances, like this one in October, when President Trump was sending the military to the Mexican border to stop a caravan of refugees.
We've got to start putting ourselves in the shoes of other people. We've got to start thinking about the consequences that others suffer. And if we've been spared those by the grace of God, let us be appreciative. Let us count our blessings. And let us reach out to those who have less. And let's stop putting up walls around ourselves and not understanding the plight, the trouble, and the problems of others.
Of course, all those appearances fuel speculation that he is running for president. Then Sherrod Brown won re-election, and the working man's Democrat from a Midwestern swing state also began trying out presidential campaign messages.
I won my election because I talk about the dignity of work. Whether you swipe a badge or punch a clock, whether you work for tips or whether you work on a salary, whether you're taking care of parents and aging parents or raising children, we don't pay enough attention to the dignity of work.
Mark Weaver, to John Kasich first. In recent days, I see the enthusiasm waning, possibly, for a presidential bid. He says he doesn't want to run in a race that he cannot win, and he cannot win the GOP primary right now, or the nomination right now. Do you think he runs? Do you think he's...
Well, I think he runs because he wants to get the attention. But there's one thing that Sherrod Brown and John Kasich have in common. Neither of them is particularly relevant in their own party. Kasich is not relevant in the Republican Party. People are welcoming him to leave. Sherrod Brown, this Democratic Party will not nominate a white senior citizen male from the Midwest to be on their ticket because the intersectionality politics of what's happening in that party right now would not permit it. There would be outrage if he were to do it. So he's still helpful in the Senate. He's still an influential person in that chamber. The notion of him being a serious presidential contender is frankly ridiculous given the direction of the Democratic Party.
Sam, do you agree, or does Brown have a chance?
I'd never had this thought postulated to me before. What I'm hearing on the streets and where I'm at is that he's perfect with this Midwestern swing. I mean, Central Casting couldn't do better.
He'd be a smart pick for them, but they would never pick him because of this intersectional stuff where they,
He was against
they
the
want African
tariffs.
American, they want a woman, they want somebody from the next generation.
Well, they don't know what they want.
Well, that's true, but there are loud voices for those and people willing to make quite a stink about it if it's not someone like that. Having said that, they'd be smart to pick somebody closer to the Sherrod Brown mold. I just don't think they will. Remember, they took away the superdelegates, so the ability of party leaders to come in and nudge the Democratic Party in the right direction is gone now that the superdelegates are gone.
I think the idea of winning is the most important thing to
Yes,
them.
and that's what the superdelegate concept was, but Bernie came in and was mad about that because they steered the nomination towards Hillary and away from Bernie. So when they removed the superdelegates, it's now going to be essentially a floor fight for who's going to be their president.
Yeah, but that says to me that they want a candidate that can bring the old coalition together.
Yes, we agree.
To John Kasich, Jim, we've been talking about him running for president since the last time he ran for president. Now that he's out of office, does he lose that pulpit, or does cable news still go to him frequently now that he's the former governor of Ohio?
No, I think he still gets frequent gigs. In fact, it may become a more regular paid appearance gig. That's kind of some of the rumors we're hearing that may be where he's headed. Remember, he did that before he was governor. He hosted a show on Fox from the
Heartland.
From the Heartland, literally from his house, and that could be similar. You could see something of that nature again. I do think he'll keep himself, in the public arena in some way. I do think. Do I think he's necessarily trying to run for president yet? I don't know, but I think he's keeping himself kind of in the bullpen, waiting for the starting pitcher to blow an arm right now. And the way things are trending right now for Donald Trump, it seems to be growing more possible that Trump could be in a certain position, maybe where the Mueller's team comes to him and says, you want to make a deal to resign, so we go easier on your son and your son-in-law, something of that nature.
That's very unlikely. What's more likely is that he's politically weakened, right? We could agree that that's more likely. Yeah. But ironically, because Kasich, metaphorically shooting at Trump all this time, he will have ruined any support with the base, and so you're more likely to see a Marco Rubio or somebody else step in and take advantage of a Trump weakness than the guy who's been shooting metaphorically at Trump all along.
My scenario says he can continue to snipe at Trump. He can become a pundit. I don't know if he fits on Fox anymore.
I think that's right.
And then he can be an independent for president.
I'm interested in this Marco Rubio versus John Kasich. I mean, I don't see either of them as. I think both of them have hurt themselves with the base. But I'm wondering how important the base is going to be if Donald Trump resigns, however the scenario works out. If it happens, I don't see the base mattering as much.
Well, the base is who elects our candidates.
Well,
right?
it is,
conservative part of our party elects our candidates. And so if Donald Trump were to do a Lyndon Johnson circa 68 and say, I'm not going to run again, the vacuum would not be filled by John Kasich because he's angered so many conservative Republicans around this country.
Is it just his criticism of Trump, or is it because he's changed his position on gun control?
Both.
And also, transgender rights?
I think that's very interesting,
both.
the change in his position on gun control and basically, poking his finger in the eye of the NRA and that kind of a thing. I think that's very fascinating, and that tells me there's something going on there, and that may be that independent streak, that independent charge that he may take on this.
Takes a lot of money.
Ballot access is the problem always for that.
But
you have to be positioned properly for it, too.
Yeah, you're right.
All right. Regardless of the rhetoric, elections and the success or failure of campaigns comes down to how things are going. In 2018, things are going pretty well. Ohio's unemployment rate remains low. Wages are creeping up. Ohio voters stuck with Republican leadership because of that. Construction continues to boom. We see cranes all over the place. Tech companies are expanding. But signs of trouble appear on the horizon. The stock market is volatile. A trade war has cut soybean exports for Ohio farmers. GM eliminated the remaining 1,500 jobs at its Chevy Cruze plant in Lordstown. Sam Gresham, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the economy in 2019?
The one thing that business wants is certainty. In this environment that we are working in now, there's very little certainty. Tariff wars, involvement in the Middle East, all sorts of things that are creating uncertainty. I think the last time I looked, the Dow was down 485, 490 this afternoon.
On Thursday afternoon as we tape this, yeah.
The tariff wars, particularly the wars with China, are costing our soybean farmers, our automobile dealers, our steel companies, all sorts of problems. So there's no predictability out over the horizon. And I think the curve says we can only ride this wave so long, and then it crashes. People, if not by attitude, are by actions, anticipating that we're going to have a recession close to 2020. Attitude and attitude, they are projecting that.
Is that the bigger threat to Trump hanging on to office, aside from Trump himself, is the economy?
The economy is always a factor in a presidential election. Although let's remember, this economy's fundamentals are very sound. We have nearly
heard that before, though.
Nearly full employment, though. The stock market is down now, but it's down from having been dramatically up over the last few years. So there's still a lot of play in this economy.
But uncertainty. Business doesn't like
Uncertainty is a problem,
uncertainty.
there's no doubt.
They don't like, and this man shoots from the hips.
Well, but uncertainty was the reason why small business owners hated Obamacare, because they had no idea what the federal government was going to make them do next. So uncertainty is a bipartisan problem.
Well, but even in that one, he's minching at the edges of trying to destroy Obamacare. People have no uncertainty in their jobs, in their health care. There's just too much uncertainty.
We can be certain of that.
Now,
Well, and what stocks plunged after the Texas ruling on the Affordable Care Act? It was healthcare, health tech.
Yeah.
The divide's still there, Jim, between rich and poor and rural and urban. We saw it in the election in 2018. The cities are diametrically different than the rural areas in Ohio, politically, but also economically.
Oh yeah, and I mean, Ohio, no better place to see that than in Ohio, where you have a few cities who are doing pretty well. Columbus, of course, being the main one, and then a number of rural areas that feel like they're still, they're still waiting for the good economic wave to come to them, and it just, so yeah, you got to deal with that, but it's been a problem forever.
Yep.
The thing that you got to remember is a lot of when you're talking about presidents or governors, a lot of it is timing. Ted Strickland did not cause the Great Recession.
But he paid the price.
But he paid the price for it because he was there when it happened. Just like John Kasich and Donald Trump did not create an economic boom. It was already kind of, they got in on the uptick. So the problem is when, the longest period of sustained growth in this country that we've had so far is not going to last forever. Right. When does it stop? And does it stop before or after 2020 election?
And how does the end of it differ from previous downturns? Because even though there is this closest we've ever been to full employment situation, the wages and the benefits are nothing what they were back in the 60s. So we're coming up to a very, very different place right now, and the fall's going to be harder and longer for that.
I remember the Grapes of Wrath. You remember that movie?
I remember the book.
People moving around the country trying to find jobs. I hope it doesn't come to that, but I think there's a lot of evidence by hope and by actions or perceptions. People are anticipating that this is going to come to a crash. 2008, some people are saying, was puppy love in comparison to what's going to happen now.
Sam's been buying gold lately. Can you tell?
So, what can the new incoming governor do? I mean, like Jim said, a lot of it is timing, a lot of it's out of his control. You're one state of 50 in a national economy, a global economy, really.
There's no doubt that politicians get too much credit for economics and too much blame for economics because it's a very complex system. Having said that, a steady hand by a governor who can come in and work with the legislature has a great ameliorating factor on the business climate in this important state.
Does Governor-elect DeWine keep Jobs Ohio, which has been criticized for its secrecy and its the way it's funded and its operation. Does he keep all of it, scrap all of it, keep part of it?
I'm not talking about inside information,
Sure.
but I think most people expect he will keep it in large form because it's been a very successful way to bring more jobs to
But will he make it more transparent? I mean,
Yes.
Governor Kasich at the Columbus Metropolitan Club this week said, well, a few people, a few journalists, and I'm among them, don't believe when he says it's the most successful, it's the most this and the most that. It's like, well, let me see the books.
That's true.
And I'm wondering if Mike DeWine is going to make it more transparent, as
Lawmakers-
he suggested on the campaign trail.
Jim, the lawmakers have those same concerns, or are they like, they think Jobs Ohio is working, we should leave it alone?
If they had those concerns, you would have seen them pass legislation in the last 4 years
Yeah.
that tried to open up the books more, and they haven't. There are some lawmakers who want to see that happen. In fact, Dave Yost wanted to see that happen as auditor. It just didn't get far enough.
Let me follow up on something Jim said real quick. If you remember the dispatch map after the election, that stark western wall of darkness and the light going to the left. The new governor is going to have to take that in consideration. We have to nourish our local communities. We have to nourish our employees. We got to stop taking away.
Siegel, what's with the map?
I don't know.
He's building walls here.
I will say that Mike DeWine has a much better chance of having a good relationship with local governments than John Kasich did. John Kasich just had an inherent issue with giving money to local governments and funneling it through the state government, and he didn't like that. And
He was trying to, he said he was trying to force consolidation, which never came, and it's hard to do with townships and school
And he's been
districts
happy
and
to sign every bill or anything that comes along limiting local power.
That's right.
All right. Last topic, a big change coming to Ohio in 2019 will be legal marijuana. It seemed unimaginable 20, even 10 years ago, but Ohioans soon will be able to walk into a shop and purchase cannabis. It's medical marijuana, of course. They need permission from a doctor, but it will become as common as picking up a prescription at a pharmacy. Then the question becomes, how soon will Ohio make pot legal without a prescription? And then there's gambling. Casinos and racinos are like wallpaper now. We hardly notice them. But sports betting likely will become legal in the not too distant future. Ann Fisher, what should we look for in the medical marijuana as the shops start to open up after the first of the year?
You just painted a picture where it's going to be on every, it's
Not
gonna
on every
be
street corner, but it's not going to be that big deal.
But it's well, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. I don't think people will barely notice it, unless you need it, and then you'll get it. But I think it's going to be a long time coming before it becomes even that much available. Even the places that are ready to go, there's always something. Whether it's the dispensaries haven't been approved, or there are not enough growers have been approved yet. There's still a big holdup. I truly do not believe, given the speed with which they've moved so far, that they're going to have anything ramped up that's going to be noticeable and useful to Ohioans who really need it for at least a year.
You're right, because they don't want to do it. They don't want to put dispensaries out there. They're going to fight recreational marijuana until the pigs come home.
But we're talking about medical marijuana and getting that out there. And I don't believe the people in charge of putting it out there are against it per se. I just don't believe that. I do believe that lawmakers made it very difficult in the way they wrote the law as vaguely as they did, left so much of the rulemaking to the agencies, put it in in agencies that are already overtaxed. And
How soon does recreational pot get on?
Oh,
the ballot?
That's the big question. I mean, when the stoned camel gets his nose in the tent, how much will he get more in there soon? And every other state suggests that it's going to come along quickly.
Yeah, Michigan, it was about 10 years, and I don't think it'll be that long. I think everything's speeding up.
Lawmakers are very eager to pass recreational marijuana, Jim?
no, and look, Ohio is rarely on the cutting edge of this kind of thing, and
Or
I wouldn't.
Of anything.
Well, casinos are a perfect example.
Yeah.
It took us, we were way behind most other states on that, and I don't expect us to.
Sports betting, though, they want to do that.
Well, they have to
Well,
now.
that's just
I
more
mean,
gambling.
yeah.
Most of the people who want a sports bet are already doing it. So
Yeah.
why not let the state get its cut?
It's just an extra room at the casinos or maybe
I'm
next to the medical pot dispensary you can have your book.
I thought you were asking about when the medical will finally get out there. I'm just thinking about that. It's going to be a year, but recreational?
All right, time for our final off-the-record parting shots. Mark Weaver, you're up first.
The relationship between the governor and the legislature is often likened to that of a honeymooning couple. I think the best way to describe it is that the legislature views Governor Kasich's leaving as like a bad divorce. They're going to have not just a short honeymoon, but maybe a long, happy marriage with this new governor. Look for a lot of productivity from the DeWine administration and the legislature through 2019.
Sam.
I heard something the other night at a social event that really irritated me. What I heard was that judges are telling attorneys that if you don't plead out a case, I'm not going to assign you any more case. We need transparency in the courts. We need criminal justice reform. If you want to get data about blacks and whites in the criminal history of a judge, you can't get it. We need criminal reform.
Jim.
If there's going to be a honeymoon with Mike DeWine, first the new governor needs to know who's going to answer the phone when he calls over to the House. For the first time since I've been doing this, and even longer than many decades, we're very likely to be going to opening day, January 7th of the Ohio House, without knowing who's going to be the next speaker, and it's likely to be a long debate on the floor, complete with many votes.
And Ann.
I don't think that the honeymoon is going to last that long. I think once he satisfies them on a few particular scores, maybe some gun legislation and the heartbeat bill, that'll be all fine and dandy. But after that, I see things going downhill. I don't think that they'll necessarily see eye to eye on some of the pragmatic things that Mike DeWine would want to do.
Apparently the first medical marijuana dispensary to open will be in the Steubenville area. I predict more traffic on I-70 heading east for folks who want to take advantage of that. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Continue the discussion on Twitter, Facebook, and on our website, wosu.org/COTR. Have a good week.